Ayyam fitan, very difficult things. Bismillah wa ni'mal wakeel. All right, Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وصل عليه في الآخرين وصل عليه يا ربنا في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله عدد كمال الله وكما يليق بكماله. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله عدد كمال الله وكما يليق بكماله. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله عدد كمال الله وكما يليق بكماله. This is a formulation that Imam al-Dardir used to use. Imam al-Dardir, his name is Abu al-Barakat, was his nickname. Abu al-Barakat Ahmed al-Dardir al-Adawi al-Maliki. So he died in 1201 after Hijrah. Imam al-Dardir died 1201 after Hijrah. So 250 years ago almost, right? He's a very interesting figure because he lived right at the cusp of all of like colonialism hitting the Arab lands. He's like right before colonialism comes. So in a sense, he kind of, as a scholarly figure and as a community figure, as a scholar, kind of almost like represents a culmination of a certain tradition right before everything went crazy. And he was a very amazing person. They called him Abul Barakat because he was known to. Abul Barakat means the father of blessings. You know, technical, direct translation would be father of blessings. And they called him Abul Barakat because whenever anything he would do, it was just like it was palpable that there was barakah in what he would do, and the decisions he would make, and that people would be around him and like things would change in their lives and stuff like that. He's also known for his dua to be answered. He was known for a lot of things. He was known for being able to find things that get lost. You know, like people would lose their children, they'd come to him, they'd ask him to make dua, they'd find their children. Ajib, yani he was Ajib figure. He was known to be able to open locked doors by reading Surah Quraysh, the Ilafi Quraysh, which he took kind of from his upbringing, which is that when they would have food, there were times, there were some righteous people, they would say when they didn't have that much food, then they would read Surah Quraysh. And the Surah Quraysh would put barakah in their food, put blessing in their food. It would suffice them. Because Surah Quraysh says what? الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ. That Allah is the one who gave them food when they were hungry and gave them safety when they were in fear. Also, some people would say that it's a good surah to recite when someone is afraid. They're facing a situation that's very scary or difficult or whatever, and they should read Surah Quraysh. لإلاف قريش إلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت الذي أطعمهم من جوع وآمنهم من خوف. Let them worship their Lord, the Lord of this house, who gave them security. It gave them food when they were hungry and gave them security when they were in a state of fear. So anyways, Imam Abu Barakat al-Dardir radiallahu ta'ala anhu nafa'allahu bih. This form of salawat, he used to use it a lot. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa zid wa barik. Ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali. Adad kamalillahi wa kama yaliqu bi kamali. It's written on the side of his masjid. Even his masjid is an interesting story. It's behind Azhar. Small little masjid, and eventually he was buried there. And he was like one of the top scholars he was probably, you could say, the top figure of Al-Azhar in his time. In the time when Al-Azhar was like the top place, So in a sense, he's very high level in terms of the ranking of the world at that time. And the incident of his masjid was very interesting, which was that the king of Morocco used to send money to people of knowledge in Egypt. He would send it to many places, of course, but specifically to the scholars of Azhar, he would send money. And one year, the king's son went for Hajj, and when he was coming back from Hajj, he passed through Cairo. And when he was passing through Cairo, basically his money ran out, you know? So him and his entourage and whoever's, this would happen. You know, this was the thing. This is a thing all throughout history. That's why one of the categories of zakat is Ibn Sabil. It's the person who is cut off from their wealth. Even they might be wealthy, but they're cut off from their wealth because of distance usually. Now it can happen for many other reasons. You know, maybe someone had to leave their land and then they can't access their bank accounts, or there's many possibilities, right? But Ibn Sabil is someone who's stranded like this. So the son of the king of Morocco, he was stranded in Cairo. And at that same time that he was stranded, the money that was coming from the king came. And the money that was supposed to come to Imam al-Dardir came to him. And as soon as they said, like, this is the money from the king, he said, how can I take the money from this man? And his son is stranded amongst us. So he took that money, he gave it to the son. And then the son was able to go back to Morocco. And when he went and told his father what had happened, then the father sent many, many times the money that was initially sent. He sent many, many times that money to Imam al-Dardir as a gift. So what did he do with the gift? He built the masjid and he went to Hajj. He built the masjid that became Masjid al-Dardir. It's right there behind Azhar again. And then he went to Hajj. That's how he spent the money. He's Imam Abu Barakat. And had many different mawaqif, you know, stances with the government of his time. So one of them, for example, was that there was a new ruler of Cairo, and you know, the rulers generally what they would do is they go to the ulama and they try to co-opt them. It's a standard practice, you know. Go to the ulama, try to co-opt them. Why? Because they go to the people of knowledge, the scholars. They want to, if the rulers can get the scholars on their side, then basically they feel more confident that they can control the people. Because the wild card in a sense of their oppressing the people is the scholars. Because the people love the scholars and they respect the scholars and so on. So if the scholars kind of like agitate things a little bit, then things get kind of, they can change. So Imam al-Dardir's time, what they would do in Masjid al-Azhar is if something went down, they would raise a red flag from the minaret of the masjid, and everyone knows, basically come to Azhar and whatever has to happen, has to happen. You know, it's like an act of rebellion almost. So the ruler, he wanted to co-opt Imam al-Dardir. So the first thing that they would do is they like try to come to the gatherings or whatever. So they came into a gathering. Imam al-Dardir was sitting, he was reading Quran, and he had his legs extended. You know, you're sitting on the wall, your legs are extended out. And the ruler came in and he didn't move his legs, which in like Arab culture is a really big thing. Continued pointing his legs at the ruler, right? So they were shocked by this. They leave, you know. Then the ruler goes back and he says, we have to get this guy, and sends one of his couriers, tells him, take this bag of money and take it to him, basically. Give him this gift of money so that we can control him. And so when he comes to the Shaykh and he had this bag of money, then he just looked at him and he told him, say to your master, like the one who sent you, say to him, الذي يمد رجليه لا يمد يديه. He said, tell your boss basically that the one who extends his legs does not extend his hand. I'm not taking any money from you, right? So then it was kind of clear what the situation was. Many things, yeah. He was an interesting figure. We've studied a number of his texts in the Majlis. Inshallah, we'll continue to study a number of his texts. In the Azhar curriculum, a number of his texts are very central to the curriculum. And one of the incidents was that, and I'll end on this one, was just that he, you know, he was known for only eating halal food. And he was very scrupulous about eating halal food. If anyone like had haram income, if they had stuff like this, he wouldn't touch their food. And everyone knew this about him. And so the rulers, of course, one of the things that they would want to do is, and one of the ways they would co-opt in a sense is to have like invite the scholar over, feed him food, make a public scene out of it, do the pre-modern equivalent of taking pictures, right? It's like a White House iftar. I'm not commenting on whether or not you should go to the White House iftar or not, but the point is, it's like they would do that, right? They would do that kind of stuff. So they would, so he would, uh, so he invited him and he said no. So, at the same time, like to say no to this kind of stuff is it's dangerous. So, but he couldn't kill him because he was very prominent. So then the ruler basically came up with this idea, which was that, okay, if he's going to say no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite all of his students, all of the other shuyukh and stuff like that. I'm going to invite all of them to dinner. And now they're going to be in a hard place because I can actually harm them, but their sheikh said no. So this was his strategy to put Imam al-Dardir in a very difficult position, right? So because of this situation, basically the Imam knew if I insist on no, then my students are going to say no, and the ruler is going to punish them. He'll either kill them or he'll imprison them, he'll harm them in some sort of way, so on. So fine, I'll just acquiesce and I'll come to this dinner. But now when he comes to the dinner, you have a second problem, which is that, yarhamukallah, which is that if he comes to the dinner and the food is presented, and these rulers are unjust people, then is the food halal? The food in the first place is not halal. Their money is taken from haram. So the food in the first place is not halal. So can Imam al-Dardir eat the food? He's not going to eat the food, right? So now you have a second layer of problem. So they come and they sit down at this gathering, and they put the food in front of him, right? And they say, and he doesn't touch it. So he says, how come you're not eating? He said, do you know the situation why I'm not eating? It's because I don't eat anything that's haram. So he said, you're saying that my food is haram and my income is haram. Like, how do you're supposed to be a scholar. How do you have any, how can you say this thing? You don't have any evidence, all these kind of things, Starts to try to use it against him. Again, same kind of like, it's reverse spiritual abuse. Which, by the way, as you could probably argue is even more common than spiritual abuse. So, and we usually think about spiritual abuse, it comes from the religious teacher who abuses their position, right? More common actually is from other people using their understanding of religion to abuse the religious teacher. So, how can you eat this? How can you say this thing? You made this claim, you don't have evidence, so on and so forth. So, and this was witnessed by many, many people. Right? So when the guy kept saying this to him, then Imam al-Dardir, he took a handful of the rice in his hand and he lifted it up for everyone to see and he made dua. He said, oh Allah, if this food is haram, then show us that this food is haram. This food is, you know. And as he said that, then blood started to drip from the rice in front of everybody. And he was like, okay, now we're done here. Like I'm not gonna eat this, right? We're on the same page? Okay, we're on the same page. You think I don't have evidence? I have evidence. So Imam al-Dardir was an amazing figure. All of that is to say, Allahumma salli wa sallam wa zid wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali adad kamalillahi wa kama yaliqu bi kamali. This is a formulation that he would use for making salat on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All right, we left off on the section on reprehensible actions that are very common, and then going to rulers. That's why I remember there was a connection to it. Inshallah, we can get to it. All right, second section of reprehensible actions that come up are reprehensible actions that happen in the marketplace. So maybe some people are attending, they haven't heard this before. The author is living probably 600-700 years ago. Maybe 700 years ago, probably. So, whatever he's commenting on is going to be related to the social environment of his time. Partially related to, these are the things that people do, and that's why they're there in the prophetic guidance as well. So reprehensible actions in the markets, these include lying about the rate of profit on goods, not disclosing defects on goods. Whoever lies and says, I bought this item for 10 dirhams and I will get a profit of 1 dirham on it, is an immoral person. It is compulsory upon a person who knows of this to inform the buyer of the seller's lying. It's interesting, huh? So someone is a seller and they're lying about how much they got the product for and what profit they're going to make. And if some third party now knows that he's lying about this cost, then it's compulsory, he says, to tell the buyer that this is the case. Actually, that's not what they paid for it, you know? If he keeps quiet because of his consideration for the seller, then he is a partner in cheating. Similarly, if a person knows of a defect in a commodity, he must tell the buyer about it. Moreover, whoever knows of the occurrence of manipulation in the weighing and measuring of goods should prohibit that either by himself or he can tell the authorities to rectify it. So it means what, when they go to weigh the product, they, mess with the scales. So they end up giving the person less than what they deserve, right? And mutaffifun. So they have to, if this is happening, then they have to make clear that this is happening. If they know about it, they have to tell people that this is what's going on. And they can't just let it go. Imam Abu Hanifa, you might know Imam Abu Hanifa from the four Imams. He was a merchant. He inherited his family business. His family business was very successful. Don't understand that he was doing business all day long and being a scholar at the same time. His family business was very successful. He didn't have to do much. He would just show up maybe once a week, a few hours, check the books, make sure everything is okay, then he goes about his business, right? Someone else managed the day-to-day of the business. But he was very scrupulous on this point of like the cost of things, how much they're sold for, how much did he buy them for, is there a defect, did he tell about the defect? To the extent that one time this is the meaning of the story, was that they had a product that was defective, and he told the person, like, if you sell this, you have to tell them that it's there. And somehow they forgot. So he basically spent his time trying to find the person who it was sold to so he could fix the situation. Because, if the product's supposed to be 50 dirhams, let's say, and there's a defect in it that would have made it 40, but now he sold it for 50. So 10 of those dirhams were stolen from that person. So he went and he searched for them until he could figure it out and fix it. We were very scrupulous on their money, very scrupulous. Where did it come from? How am I going to purify it? Even the idea of zakat, even on top of a person assuming that their money is all halal, you know, they did their job properly, they didn't cut corners, they didn't overcharge, they didn't deceive people, they didn't do any of these things, assuming that all of that was the case, still on top of it, we pay zakat as purification. So it's very, very important, the person has sidq in their work. Other reprehensible actions include invalid conditions, selling things you're not supposed to, interest, all of those kind of things. Okay. Number 3 section, reprehensible actions in the streets. In the streets. These include things like building a shop that is attached to buildings that are owned by other people, erecting parts of buildings which protrude into the street, and planting trees if that leads to the constriction of the road and prejudice to the people who pass through the road. So let me finish actually. However, putting an amount of wood and food that can be carried home by people is permissible because that is a common need. Okay, so what is the idea here? The idea here is that the street is a public space. And people are not allowed to cause harm or constriction in that public space. And if they're gonna like put a stall or something like that, and that stall goes up onto the wall of someone's private property, then they have to have permission from that person and their private property. If they're going to erect something that goes into the street, then they would need a permit in order to go into the street like this, so on and so forth. Of course, assume like some level of fairness in governance, right? There's probably all kinds of issues coming up and, assume some level of fairness in governance and so on. Then he says, however, putting an amount of wood or food that can be carried home by people is permissible. So meaning if someone has some like wood or food or something like this, and they put it in the street and people take it and they take it home, then that's okay because this is a common need. People need wood, they need food, stuff like that. If you put it out there for them to take it, so you're not harming the street in a sense. Other reprehensible actions include tying an animal on the road in such a manner that the road becomes constricted and this discomforts people. This must be prohibited except if a person does that out of the need to get down from the animal. So meaning normally you can't just park your car in the middle of the street, right? You park your car where it's supposed to be parked, and you don't park it somewhere else, this kind of thing. It's like a Juma hadith, take this section and make a poster out of it, post it on the street corners for Juma, get a special permission from the city, like people have permissions to post their open house signs. You get permission to post signs that say don't park in people's driveways and be kind to the neighbors and all of these kind of things. I mean, the idea here essentially is what? What is the idea? The idea is the benefit of the individual does not take priority over the benefit of the community. It's essentially what all of this is going back to, right? Some person wants to do something, and their doing that thing is going to affect everyone else in a negative way, but it's convenient for them. So should they do it? No, they shouldn't do it because what's convenient for them isn't more important than what everyone needs. More reprehensible acts include making an animal carry a load that it is incapable of carrying, throwing rubbish onto the road, throwing watermelon peels on the road, or throwing water on the street in a manner which is likely to cause the passerby to slip. This is with regards to water which comes from a specific gutter. If it is rainwater, then it is responsibility of the ruler to deal with the issue, and the individuals are not required to do that. It's very interesting. Okay, so don't give the animal more than it can carry. And probably related to that would be like if you have a truck and you fill the truck, then make sure you put the cover over the bed of the truck so that it doesn't spill onto the everything else and so on. It would be all related to this. Throwing trash on the road, throwing food on the road, water on the street in a manner. So what's the thinking like, what does this mean? People don't have plumbing, right? So you use water in the house, you have leftover water. What would people often do? Just throw it in the street. Just throw it in the street, right? So if you throw it in the street in a way that is causing harm to those who come by, then that would be something that you cannot do. It's like, however, rainwater is different. And the rainwater and the way that it drains in the construction of the street and the city and so on, that's the responsibility of the ruler. It's not the responsibility of every individual. This is interesting. SubhanAllah. Reprehensible actions in bathhouses. Okay. Skip some pieces. So some of these, what's the issue? The issue is that people in the past, again, they didn't have running water. So they didn't have bathrooms, like in the sense that we have them, with showers and baths and all of this kind of stuff. And if they wanted to take a bath, what they would do is they would go to the public bathhouse, right? In the public bathhouse, there's rooms and there's spaces and there's water and it's hot and people will dump the water for you or you can get the water and that's how you clean yourself, right? So the main issue that would always come up in the books in the past is that, people exposing themselves in a way that they should not when they go to the bathhouse. Actually, subhanAllah, it's an issue up to today. You go to maybe probably for men and women, I don't know, but for men it's definitely an issue up to today. You go to the gym and you go to the locker room. People do all kinds of things in the locker room, take all kinds of liberties. And it's, there's a certain amount of the body that even if the opposite gender is not around, because the bathhouses were segregated, right? So men would be in a certain bathhouse, women would be in a different space. Doesn't mean that there's no rule. There's still some rules. There's still certain things that shouldn't be exposed in front of other people. And even if you're washing, then you figure out a way to wash that doesn't expose you, which is not like that complicated. People think it's like, how do you do that? Well, how do you wash someone when they die? You don't expose someone when they die. They're covered and you wash them. And you wash the body and you fully wash them and you take care of what you need to take care of and you move on with it. Other things that are bad in this case would be taking like dirty hands or dirty utensils and putting them into a small amount of water. Um, Small amount of water here doesn't mean like this thing or something. Small amount of water is something that's less than qullatan. He's Hanbali, so it probably means less than qullatan. People's modern estimations of that vary. trying to, because, in the Hanafi school, we don't have this definition of, basically the issue is in the fiqh, in the law. The rules of purity and impurity change based on small amount of water or large amount of water. And then the question becomes, how do you distinguish between the two? In the Hanafi school, we don't have like a particular number. We have a space. If it's an amount of water such that if you were to move one side of the water, it doesn't reach the other side of the water, then it's a large amount of water. It's very kind of, that's why in Central and South Asia, you see these masajid, and you see the beautiful masajid, and then in front of them, you see a big pool of water, right? That pool of water is for you to make wudu in. And because the later scholars defined it by 10 arm lengths by 10 arm lengths and one hand in depth. So you'll find these pools in front of the masajid. But other scholars, they put a specific definition on it, which is two qullas. I'm trying to remember what it was. The number that's coming to my head is something like 300 liters. I think like those big barrels. I don't know how many gallons are those barrels, like 50 or 100 gallons or something. I think that's roughly, I think, the amount that would be considered a lot. So he's saying is if you have a dirty hand or a dirty utensil, you don't stick it in that amount of water. Because if it's that small amount of water, then it can affect the ruling on that water. So if you have, and dirty here is probably not like cleanliness dirty. We're losing a lot in the translation, actually. It's hard. But it's probably not cleanliness dirty, it's probably najasa dirty. Actually, I was talking to a colleague and he told me, he said, "You're teaching that text?" I said, "Yeah." It was someone actually, when we were studying, we used to get together, a group of us, and read this text every Friday. It's how we tried to like have something spiritual in our studies because usually your studies are very technical. So we used to get together and read it. He said, "Oh, okay, you're reading it." He said, "You're using the English translation?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "The one that's really bad is the third volume. It's the one we're almost on now." He said, "The other ones were half decent translation. You could work with them, but the third one was a lot of mistakes. So we'll see when we get to it, inshallah." But this dirty here probably refers to what we call in the law, a ritual impurity. Okay, so ritual impurity is not like your hand is dirty, you put it in the water. Ritual impurity is something that if you put it in the water, you can no longer use that water to purify yourself for prayer and all of these kind of things. So that would be like urine, blood, all of these kind of things, vomit. Uh, these kind of things are ritual impurities. So don't take something like that and put it in a small container. Sorry, I got lost on that point for a second. Okay, reprehensible actions in hosting people. These include, putting out silk, putting out gold and silver and for their containers, for their things. I didn't look up that, subhanAllah. I mean, to put that down, I didn't look up that question. Did you find any answer to your question? Okay. Inshallah khair. Basically doing anything that you're not supposed to be doing in the invitation. Uh, if we're to be honest, like most of our weddings are filled with lots of things that we're not allowed to do by the Sharia. So that's probably like the easiest example of places where things happen that really shouldn't be happening. A lot of waste of food, a lot of waste of money, a lot of things being done that shouldn't be done, so on. And I don't want to talk about it too much, but may Allah help us. Uh, Other reprehensible acts include, I'm just going to read it, hosting an innovator who speaks about his innovation. So I remember we talked about this idea of bid'ah and where is there an innovation in the religion, what does it mean, and so on. Uh, and and so there's a difference between someone who does something that they shouldn't do or believes something that they shouldn't do, and someone who does that and they call to it. Like they invite people to that thing. But anyways, the point is that you don't want to like encourage these things. But again, like we talked about when it comes to hospitality and social interactions and things, like there could be more to it. He's living in a particular environment, we're living in a different environment. Sometimes you're not inviting the person because signing off on the wrong thing that they're doing. Sometimes you're inviting the person because you want to be good to them and you want them to like you, and then maybe you can advise them something. Maybe they're a family member, you want to keep family ties, so on. There's a lot of different reasons. So don't want to overdo that one again. Okay. General reprehensible actions are a lot of the things that we've kind of talked about. He says it's compulsory for every Muslim to start within by reforming himself through being constant in performing the compulsory deeds and avoiding the prohibited things. So one should start with themselves. After that, they go to their family and their relatives. After that, they go to their neighbors and the people of their locality. After that, they go to the people of their country. After that, they go to the masses and to the farthest parts of the world. So the idea is, it's a very simple point, but extremely important point also because we get, again, overwhelmed sometimes by the things that happen in the world. But when one tries to fix things that are wrong, start with ourselves. We go to our families, we go to our neighbors, go to our locality. This helps us then to be very natural in the way that things change. All right, section 2. We made it. Enjoining rulers and sultans to do good and prohibiting them from evil. Just want to see how much he says here. I suspect that he's going to say a lot. And my suspicion was correct. It's great. He really says a lot. So what's interesting about this book is that, as you remember probably from the beginning, uh, the author, he's taken a much, much larger work and summarized it into something that's much smaller. Okay? So what that means is that when you're reading it, in comparison to the original, sometimes the sections are really short. But of course, the author is the one who's choosing how much to summarize or not summarize, right? So it gets to this section. This section is actually very long. Enjoining rulers and sultans to do good and prohibiting them from evil. So let's see what he says. I have mentioned the stages of enjoining good and prohibiting evil. It is permissible to apply the first two stages to the sultans, which are informing the sultans that such and such an action is evil and admonishing them. However, addressing the sultan roughly like saying, "O oppressor, O person who does not fear Allah," is not permissible if it leads to commotion whose consequences may affect third parties. If a person knows that he is the only one who will be afflicted if he utters these words, then he may do so according to the majority of the scholars. However, my view is that it is impermissible because the objective is to prevent evil, and inciting the sultan to deal with him in an unjust manner is greater in evil than that which the person sought to prevent. This is because sultans deserve respect, and if they hear a subject saying to a sultan, "O oppressor, O immoral person," they would consider that to be highly disrespectful, and they will not hesitate to attack the person who says that. So, what is the issue? Okay, you have a ruler. The ruler is doing something wrong. The goal is to prohibit that thing that's wrong, right? You want to stop the thing that's wrong, and so you go to the ruler and you give this ruler advice. How do you do so? So he's saying one possibility is you go to the ruler and you speak to them in a very aggressive way. And you kind of have good reason to believe that when you speak to them in this aggressive way, not only will harm come to you, it will come to others as well. So he says this is not permissible. Second possibility is you go to the ruler and you speak to them in a very aggressive way, and you are confident that harm will come to you, but not necessarily to other people. But you have good reason to believe the harm will come to you. He says the majority of scholars said that this is okay. He takes the position that you shouldn't do that because doing that will likely result in a response that will harm you. And so you're trying to stop harm, but you just created harm. The main takeaway here is not necessarily, again, is to kind of like think about how he's thinking about the situation, and that he did note that there's a difference of opinion. So one could come and speak to the scholars and speak to the rulers in a way that's very kind of firm and somewhat harsh, knowing that they might harm you as a result of that. Imam Ahmed from the four Imams, do not confront a sultan because his sword is unsheathed. What has been transmitted that the pious predecessors confronted their rulers is because these rulers used to revere the scholars, and when they were relaxed with them, they could bear their criticism in general. So basically, Imam Ahmed is saying, don't go to the scholars, and don't go to the rulers, sorry, and deal with them like this, because their swords are unsheathed. And what you heard from people in the past, that they would go to rulers and they would talk to them like this, they did that because those rulers at that time had at least a semblance of restraint when it came to the scholars. So the scholars were then able to say something to them and give them this reminder. But now that's not the case, so don't do so. This is, again, a position. I've compiled the advices of the pious predecessors to the caliphs and rulers in my book, Al-Misbah Al-Mudi, and I will choose some stories from it and mention them here. Okay, so he brings some stories. I actually haven't seen this text, Al-Misbah Al-Mudi. For better or for worse, a lot of things in the Arabic library are available in PDF form online. Of course, you should buy the book if you can, but especially when it's hard to buy the book. Okay. I don't think this is the same author. Abi Abdullah Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Ahmed ibn Mudair al-Ansari. I don't know. Actually, it might be. Anyways, it's going to take too long to figure that out. All right. So he wrote a book on it, basically. He's going to bring some of the stories from that here. Number one, Sa'id ibn Amr told Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu an, I am advising you with some words on the general principles and parameters of Islam. SubhanAllah. Fear Allah in relation to people, but do not fear people in relation to Allah. Fear Allah in relation to people, but do not fear the people in relation to Allah. Your actions should not contradict what you say, for the best speech is that which is affirmed by action. Love for all the Muslims that which you love for yourself. Be prepared to face hardship for the truth, and do not be afraid of the blame of the critics in issues which concern Allah. So this is all Sa'id ibn Amr saying this to Umar ibn Khattab. Okay, Umar ibn Khattab being second ruler of the Muslims, the Khalifa after Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, one of the greatest people in all of history. And Sa'id ibn Amr says, okay, you're the ruler now, I'm going to give you some advice. Fear Allah with regards to the people, but don't fear the people with regards to Allah. And do all of these things, he says. Then Umar says, who can do that? You know, oh, Abu Sa'id, you know, who can do this? He said, a person who has assumed the responsibility that you have assumed. He didn't give him, he didn't give him any break, you know? Someone taking the position, anyone who's taken the position that you've taken, they can do this. Meaning, like, you took the position, you have to do it now. He doesn't continue here, but the relationship between Sa'id ibn Amr and Umar ibn Khattab is very interesting. Basically, what happens after Sa'id tells this to Umar, so Umar tells him, how can someone do that? He says, you can do it. You know, someone who's taking on what you're taking on, they can do it, and so on. Then he says, then help me with it. And he says, no. So he says, I'm not going to help you with it. Like, I don't, basically, Omar is saying, then be the ruler of one of the lands. Right? Like, we have these lands. If you're telling me this thing, then you be the governor of one of the lands. Take over leadership. Help me with this leadership. So he said, no, I'm not going to do that. And then Omar basically told him, like, you're going to say what you're going to say to me and give me this advice. Like, I'm not leaving you alone until you take leadership over one of these lands. Like, you now made yourself partner in this. You're going to be, and you're going to be the governor of one of these lands. And I think he sent him, I want to say, to Hims. Anyone remember? I think it was Homs. And the people there were notoriously difficult to rule over, very difficult to deal with people, you know? So Said goes there. He becomes a head of these people. And eventually, after some time, Omar sends a letter and he says, What's going on? They said, we have some complaints from our ruler. He said, okay. They come to Medina. Tells them, bring your complaints, bring Sa'id, and we're going to hear the complaints against the ruler. Said, we have three complaints. One of them is that he doesn't come out early in the day. And these are literally their complaints, okay? He doesn't come out early in the day. Sometime in the day passes and then he comes out. Because the rulers, they're public figures in the sense they're expected to be in public. Anyone who's has an issue, just come up to them, tell them, I have this issue, fix the issue. That's what they're there for, right? So he's not coming out until later in the morning. So first complaint, he said, okay. Oh, by the way, in Omar, when he called Sa'id, he made dua. He said, oh Allah, don't basically like protect my good opinion of him. You know, he said, like, I love this man. I think he's a good man. Protect my good opinion of him. It's beautiful, actually, dua that Omar made. Then he said, what's your second complaint? He said, our second complaint is that once a month, we don't see him at all. Once a month, we don't see him at all. He gets one day off in a month. I said, okay, what's your third complaint? So my third complaint is that sometimes when we're talking with him, he just faints and like we don't know what to do. Just passes out. So I said, okay, Saeed, like what's your response to these things? So my response to the first one, he says, as to the first one, I wish I wouldn't have to say this, but because they're making the complaint and because you're asking, I have to answer. But basically he's saying like, I wouldn't talk about these things unless you force me to talk about these things. He said, you know, we don't have a lot of money, so there's no one to do the work of the house for us other than the who's in the house. And so every morning I have to do some work in the house and then I go out. He said, okay, it's fine. You know, clean clothes, do different things, wash things up, do housework, and then I go out. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Lesson for men too here. Because people basically, I mean, we open up a second can of worms here, but essentially, like a lot of times people had servants. So either you were wealthy and you had a servant or you had a slave, to be frank, or you weren't wealthy and you had to do it yourself. And if you, this was kind of like the understanding. If you had to do it yourself, then you had to do it yourself. And it wasn't only like one person who was doing it. The men would do it too. Uh, and that was looked as something that's a responsibility of the man. If the man's not able to afford someone to help with the work of the house, then he has to help with the work of the house. Anyways, I don't want to, people misuse and go crazy with all of these things. It's not like such a big deal. It's basically he helped, you know? So he would come out. Then they said, okay, what's your answer to the second one? He says, as for the second one, I wish I didn't have to say anything, but since you're asking, I'll have to answer it. He says, I only have one pair of clothes. And so at least once a month, I have to wash the clothes. And so when I go to wash the clothes, I don't have anything to wear, so I have to stay at home until the clothes dries. And then I put the clothes on and I go out. So he said, you guys okay with this one? Yes, we're okay with this one. And it's not because, by the way, he couldn't get money. Like Omar would give him enough money to handle all of these things if he wanted it. He said, no, I don't want the money. You give the money to the people, give me enough to survive. I don't need more than that, right? أتعبوا من بعدهم يعني حقيقة هؤلاء أتعبوا من بعدهم. They made it very difficult for anyone who comes after them. They really, the standard that they set was next level. They said, okay, second one is established. What's the third one? What's the explanation on the third one? He said, the third one is that when I was not a Muslim and I was still in my Jahiliyyah, the days before Islam, then they took, I want to say it was Khubayb. I think it was Khubayb. Khubayb ibn Adi, radiallahu anh. They took him, the Quraysh took him as a prisoner and they were torturing him. And they were going to kill him. And they said to him, would you, now what, wouldn't you like for your companion, meaning the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to be in your position instead of you, you know, stuff like this. And they were taunting him and they were torturing him. And he said, by Allah, I wouldn't exchange what I'm in for even the prick of a thorn to come to the skin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm good where I'm at. Kill me, you know? And he says, and I watched all of this and I saw this horrible scene take place. and I didn't do anything about it. And then later on, I became Muslim. And then every time I think about that, I pass out. This is Sa'id ibn Amr, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So him and Umar, they had this relationship. So then after he said these three things, Umar, of course, he said, "Khalas, go back to the people. There's no, you guys, you don't have any claim against him. He's a righteous ruler. You know, you just listen to him and do what you need to do." This is the first one, Sa'id ibn Amr. You can read it in like Men Around the Messenger, Men and Women Around the Messenger. It's a very important book. Everyone should read it. The biographies of the companions. Because the companions are evidence of the truth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, as Imam al-Qarafi said, Imam al-Qarafi said, لو لم يكن لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم معجزة إلا أصحابه لكفوه لإثبات نبوته. He said, if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had no miracle other than his companions, it would have been enough to prove that he was a prophet. Because like who these people became, it's all an indication of the quality of the teacher. Because people can't go like beyond their teacher. And this is why you have this tradition in Islamic history to look for righteous people, to look for righteous teachers, try to spend time with them and so on. Number two, Qatada said, Umar ibn Khattab, maybe we'll do, Qatada said, he narrated this story. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh came out of the masjid with al-Jarud, I don't know what that is. And he saw a beautiful woman in the road. He greeted the woman, and she replied to his greeting. She said, "O Umar, I saw you while you were young wrestling with other boys in the Ukaz market." It's like a famous gathering, Ukaz. The Arabs used to have the modern equivalent of their poetry slam at the Ukaz market. All the greatest poets of all of Arabia would come there. They would exchange their poetry, see who's the winner. So she's saying, I used to see you when you were a kid wrestling with other boys in the marketplace. You quickly grew up and you attained the position of caliph. Therefore, fear Allah concerning your subjects, and know that the person who fears death fears that one day he will not be on this earth. Omar cried. And Jarud said, okay, so Jarud was someone she was with. That makes it, uh, or he was with. Omar was with Al Jarud, and they saw this third person. So she told him, I saw you when you were a little kid. Now look at you, you're all big and you're the caliph. Fear Allah. You know? So she says this to him, and Omar starts crying. I feel like this in San Diego, honestly, like sometimes. There's people I know in San Diego, they knew me when I didn't know how to pray. They knew me when I couldn't recite Quran, when I didn't know Arabic, like, so, they're just aunties and uncles, right? Like, so who are you, Like, fear Allah. We knew you, you probably didn't even make your prayer. Your prayer wasn't probably valid for 6 months. So fear Allah. Omar cried. Jarud said, you had the audacity to speak to the caliph in this manner, and you have made him cry. Omar said, leave her alone. Leave her alone. Don't you know who that is? That is Khawla bint Hakim, whom Allah heard her speak while he was above the seven heavens. So by Allah, Omar must listen to her speech. You know the story? In Surah Al-Mujadila or Al-Mujadila, قَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ قَوْلَ الَّتِي تُجَادِلُكَ. This is Allah heard, there's a story in the beginning of Surah Al-Mujadila, this woman, she had a dispute with her husband. And basically the end of what came from the dispute was that Allah revealed these verses. And He said, Allah has heard the speech of the one who was disputing with her husband about this issue. And then it reveals like some rulings on certain things in the Sharia. So Umar says, that's khawla. Like, she spoke to me, I listened. So when she spoke, Allah listened to her. Allah heard what she said and revealed verses of the Quran. So if Allah is responding to her in the Quran, then Umar has to listen to her. Yeah. So yeah, this humility. Such beautiful stories, right? Mm. I'll read number three because it's short and then we'll stop. An old man from the tribe of Ezd came to Muawiyah's chamber and he said, O Muawiyah, fear Allah. Know that each day and night that comes by takes you further away from the world and brings you closer to the afterlife. Behind you is something that you cannot escape. A flag which you cannot pass has been erected. How quickly will you reach the flag? How soon will the thing coming after you catch up with you? Indeed, we and the world perish, but the afterlife lasts forever. If you do good, you will attain goodness in the afterlife. And if you act in a bad manner, you will be punished. Okay? So this is the way to speak to the rulers. So when you have an elected official in front of you, how do you speak to them? I'm not giving you political organizing advice. Go to people like Khalid. Go to the experts. Yes, I mean, this is what they do. They're the experts. But, like someone has to tell them the truth. There should be some people of knowledge. If they sit with elected officials, they say, we really want to hear from you. We want to know what's going on with your community. You say, yeah, that's fine. And I also want to tell you that you're in a position of responsibility. You're responsible for every single life that lives on the lands that you're responsible for. If you do good by them, then you will find that good in the hereafter. If you do bad by them, you will find that bad in the hereafter. People have to tell them these things. Most people believe in God. It is still in America. Like, at least they should still take a hereafter reminder, inshallah. And then go from there. Do whatever else you need to from there. Sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Comments, questions, please feel free. Yes.
So much of these are couched in the assumption that the Muslim rulers and sultan, that the rulers, sultans, et cetera, are one Muslim and possibly actually care about Islam.
Yeah.
But at the very least, Muslim, how do those, uh, how do they or don't they relate to the situation of people who are living in completely non-Muslim countries? Countries that might even be antagonistic.
Yeah. And that's a good question, mashallah. That's also why, even what I'm saying about the officials, take it with a grain of salt. Like, you notice their consideration in the previous part was on basically trying to prevent something that's harmful and trying to bring some sort of good. So a lot of how we do politics is going to boil down to that, essentially. A Muslim is living in a situation, whatever situation that might be, even could be in a minority setting, could be in a Muslim majority setting with, there's not a whole lot of concern for what Islam has to say about anything. Then each person will give advice and engage in a way that works for that situation, essentially trying to bring about what's best. And recognizing that sometimes, sometimes deeper things have to change before you can say a whole lot. And I think the Hijra is a good example in this, things the Prophet ﷺ, they couldn't do in Mecca. It's not because it doesn't matter, it's because they just couldn't do it. There's no way for it to happen without people getting killed. But when they get to Medina, things change. Allah says very clearly, like now you have permission to fight, let alone speak, what needs to be said. So I think that's pretty much probably the most that I can say.
Texts or examples where scholars within the United States who are aware of U.S. history or culture and all these things have actually had substantive conversations around what that means, what harm outweighs other harms. Like, have there been those types of conversations that you're aware of?
I mean, I haven't seen it in writing. I'm sure that there's conversations that happen around it. But I mean, there's a caveat that you put in there about that they understand America and its culture and all of these kind of things that you know. I think that Imam Zayd has been working on some things in this regard, but I don't know, like, I don't think anything will be published, but I know that there's been some conversations trying to bring like scholars and people of knowledge who have a deep familiarity with the histories and policies of this land and trying to say like, okay, how are we going to engage? And now is the time where like his what he was kind of pushing, actually I need to reach out to him, but one of the things that was being talked about like 6 months ago was, okay, Trump was elected and a lot of people in the Muslim community are talking about leaving the US. And that's not what we're going to do. We need to double down on what our position is and what we have to offer this country and what it is that we can do here. And a part of that, of course, would be political engagement. So I'm sure there's some, people who have done that. I think Imam Zaid would be like a good person to pick on that, or some of the people that maybe are at the higher levels of mana and stuff like that. Uh, Specifically, I'm just thinking out loud. You probably have a better, like, are you seeing that from anyone that you're coming across? Have it, yeah.
More, the thing that's been, I've been spending the most time thinking about is the lack of any type of historical or cultural understanding of America.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Really,
Yeah,
very few that, and that's not a diss or saying
right,
this would be, it's just zero
right,
understanding of it, feeling comfortable making statements that are based off of complete lack of.
right, like, right.
That I stated earlier, I
Mm-hmm.
think gets at some of those. It's what has made me think about it.
Yeah. This book, are you expecting to receive it back? Like, is it a loan or is it a gift? Okay, just so I'm clear on the hukum.
I'm assuming, I'm sorry, I want to.
No, please.
I'm assuming lots of the very similar conversations took place under colonial bias among scholars. And I'm wondering if that's a space where people can look to for prior guidance into situations that are very similar to what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Under the assumption of looking at what's happening to many US citizens or Muslims in America as almost the colonized living within the empire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there is actually, subhanAllah, one of the things that comes with displacement and oppression is that knowledge is not linked to previous generations in the same way that you would hope it to be. I'm getting to a point with this because, like a lot of these things are so complicated that if you were to like sit and say, okay, I want to read something on this, just doing the research and coming to somewhere on it is going to take so much of your life that you'll never get anywhere. But if you have people who know about it, it's like anything else, right? Like if you have someone who's an expert on it and they know it, you sit with them, they can break it down for you and you get it, right? There's a lot of like the lived experience of Islam where all of these theories that we're getting in these books, they're playing out in the lives of people, right? And the scholars and the communities and so on. And that was usually something that you learn not from directly from a book per se. You learn it from being in contact with a generation of people of knowledge who are going to make clear to you like, okay, these are the areas we disagree. These are the areas we agree. These are the topics where the debate is really heated. And you're going to have some familiarity with all of that, right? I'm saying all of this because like when I read the biographies or a little bit of the history of just take one place, Egypt, in like the 20th century, there is a lot that can be learned on a lot of these questions. Because, Egypt went through a lot. The French came, the British came, some sort of other stuff is happening. How do you respond to these different situations? Every modernist movement, every intellectual movement passed through Egypt. in the 20th century. And at the same time, you have like the last remnant of the high level scholars kind of like ending towards the beginning of the 20th century is kind of like the end of that era in a sense. Like you still have, don't get me wrong, you still have incredible people of knowledge and scholars, but like what you would get at the end of the 20th, like early 1900s, that was, things changed at that point. And so like that would be if someone grew up in that. So you have a generation of scholars now who are dying in their like 70s, 80s, 90s, who learned from the people who lived that. So every now and then when you're like sitting with them or you're listening to them, you hear like some insight, like so and so said this about this issue, or they wrote a book on this topic, or this and that, but it's beginning to die out. And especially with the displacement of a lot of that generation of scholars, 70, 80, 90-year-old people, so many of them were displaced from their lands, were oppressed, died in prisons, did all of these things. Like, so there's a disconnect there. That's on my point that I don't think you would have had it in the same way in previous generations. Uh, but you know, Allah Mustaan. I could be reaching on that. I could be wrong, but we need it. Inshallah, maybe we can start to get it. Hopefully, you know, I think the thing that people need to come together, they need to spend time together, they need to talk to each other, they need to be able to have these debates, and that's what I think Imam Zaid was trying to push. I'm not sure what came out of it because that was several months ago. There's supposed to be like some sort of statement, declaration and stuff, but maybe we'll see. To reach out to him, inshallah. Am I aware of what? Mike Huckabee's text message to Trump. Is it in like the last 24 hours or is this before? Last week. Okay. No, I'm not aware of it.
President God spared you in Butler, Pennsylvania. You're the most consequential president in the century you've ever. The decision on your shoulders, I would not want to be made by anyone else but you, Diwan. You have many voices speaking to you, sir, but there's only one, all capitalized. Voice them, address his, capitalized voice of God. I am your appointed servant in this land and I'm available for you, but I do not try to get in your presence often because I trust your instincts. No president in my lifetime has been in a position like yours, not since Truman in 1945. I know these documents say that you only encourage you. I believe you will hear from heaven, and that voice is far more important than mine or anyone else's, anyone capitalized, all caps. You sent me to Israel to be your eyes, ears, and voice, and to make sure our flag flies above our embassy. My job is to be the